And I think the sound's working. Yeah, there it is. Okay, I didn't have audio for a minute there. Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about the story of young Mr. Chris. And I apologize. The name Kuehne. I'm not sure how his name's pronounced, but this story is. I know it's boiling my blood, and I imagine it's going to boil yours too. But we're going to be talking about the January 6th event, and frankly, Christopher Wray ordering his FBI agents to murder this young veteran's unborn child, and this is the Biden administration. Let's cover this. All right. Oh, it's like my camera got a little out of the. There we go. There's the shot. All right. Good morning. Oh, Sergeant Major says Penny is watching, so I guess I'll watch the F-bombs this morning. Good morning, sunshine. I love you. I'll see you in a few hours. Mommy and I are heading down that way in just a little bit after the show. Oh, and whew, this may not be the show that I would prefer my kids watch this morning, because we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy material. And I can't think of a better way to start this episode than let's just go ahead and get into the article. I have this article from the Gateway Pundit. The boys and I have been chewing on this one in the infamous thread, because just wow. Chris Wray's FBI forced a young mother to stand outside barefoot with her 4-year-old boy in his pajamas in 12-degree weather while they ransacked her home. She lost her baby the next day. The baby died. Okay, Sergeant Major says Penny has left the building. Okay, so while one pair of my favorite little ears are away from the screen, let me say this in no uncertain terms. Christopher Wray used the FBI that he controls to murder, that's right, to fucking murder a baby in order to arrest an American war hero for what amounts to a fabricated charge of misdemeanor trespassing. Keep in mind, what we're talking about. So what he's accused of, what Christopher Kuehne, and I'm gonna go with Kuehne because I'm just not sure, and I apologize, Chris, if I'm getting that wrong. But I'm having to read it, and it's Kuehne. So I'm kind of guessing here on that name. Was sentenced on Friday for his actions on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. Understand that with a very, very narrow minority being outstanding, and that's some Proud Boys that were charged with seditious conspiracy, the dramatically vast majority of the thousands of people who have been incarcerated without due process have been charged with nothing more than misdemeanor trespassing. A charge which on the face of it seems to be an illegitimate charge to begin with. Not one of them, even those charged with the seditious conspiracy charges, not one has been charged with the crime of insurrection. That's important to remember because they keep using that word, but I don't think it means what they think it means. I know it doesn't mean what they think it means because everybody who keeps crying insurrection was either involved in or directly in support of an actual attempted insurrection, a series of them. I've talked about the BLM riots before in the context of the insurrection narrative, but let's be very clear. I am not arguing that BLM attempted to conduct an insurrection against the United States of America. What I am arguing is, and I think this is plain by the merits and the facts on the face of it, that the BLM and Antifa rioters that set up individual autonomous zones were individually conducting separate insurrections against the governments and municipalities of those specific areas. Like the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, the Chaz. That was an insurrection against what was that one? It was Portland, Oregon, right? That was the conduct of an insurrection. I say that advisedly as somebody with experience dealing with actual insurrection and what it really is. It is when the indigenous, local, national citizens engage in the conduct of war by taking and holding territory and denying access to that territory by force, denying that access to the government, the law enforcement, and the military of that territory. So the Chop Chaz guys, they committed an insurrection. They conducted an insurrection against the city of Portland. That's what an insurrection is. What happened on January 6th? Okay, thank you, Danielle. That was Chaz Chop was Seattle. Hey, forgive my confusion there. Those events were a while ago, and Seattle and Portland both had major occupied territory / autonomous zones. And in case you missed it, for those of you who are watching local, there is still currently an Antifa occupied autonomous zone engaged in protest against the municipal training facility. Legion says the grossly disproportionate sentencing is meant to humiliate you and make you feel powerless. The government enjoys gaslighting and terrifying you. Humiliation ritual. Yes. And Danny vindicates me by saying, but it spread to all of the big blue cities, so you're not wrong. Correct. And in many of those big blue cities, there were multiple autonomous zones. You know, most of us only, most of you out there who kind of glance at the news and get a little bit here and there. Now it's not true of you guys because you watch this show, so you've heard me talk about this before. But your average American, even your average conservative American, who has a more robust news diet, they really only heard about the Seattle Chaz Chop thing. Most of them do not understand that there were several hundred of those autonomous zones operating simultaneously all across the country, in every major city and many lesser cities. And Legion points out we had virtually no BLM riots in Florida. We had almost no riots in Georgia. And I think if it hadn't been for Rayshard Brooks committing suicide by cop, we wouldn't have had any actual riots related to BLM. But there were still autonomous zones. And there were still autonomous zones in Florida as well. The riots, however, in the states where effing around can get you found out, were blessedly minimal. Steve says ATL stopped the attempt here. They took action to mitigate, but they didn't stop it entirely. Like I was saying a minute ago, there is still an autonomous zone over by Cop City. It's not nearly the hotbed that it was 6 months ago, but you know, even just 6-8 months ago, there were firefights happening between police and occupants of the autonomous zone. People were shot and killed, officers and rioters. Or I should say correctly, insurrectionists. So, Chris Kuehne is charged. I don't think it even says what he's actually charged with, but essentially, hang on. Okay, it comes down here. It says Chris, a decorated war veteran who was picking up trash inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. There's video of this, right? The guy's in there picking up trash, cleaning up behind the other protesters. And they said he needs to be taught a lesson, right? But, you know, and I can link the article for you, but it doesn't say what he was sentenced for. So let's see. Decorated Marine vet gets brief prison time in January 6th case. Accused of conspiring with others. Go away. Okay, Kansas City Star, I'm trying to read your article and talk about you doing good reporting. Brought orange reflective tape for KC Proud Boys to wear to identify themselves in the crowd. So, it's saying he was a Proud Boy. And let me tell you something. The Proud Boys, I've personally had some contact with Proud Boys. I went to one of their parties. I've had conversations with some of their members. You know what I saw a lot of at the Proud Boy party? It wasn't a bunch of white supremacists. It was white boys, black boys, Jewish boys, gay boys. It was a bunch of dudes who got together. They were drinking. They put up a dog cage and did cage fights, mostly mixed martial arts type stuff. They were barbecuing. They were smoking cigars. They were telling stories. Right? They were networking a bit. There were a lot of tradesmen there, and hey, electrician buddy, I'll trade you cleaning up, fixing your toilet for fixing my light switch, type of stuff. They're a social club. They've gotten involved in some political protests, but by and large, they're a social club. When you look at the left, the Antifa, the BLM, you cannot say the same. Those organizations are explicitly pseudo-militarized, violent protest organizations. They exist to cause riots and to scam smooth-brained leftists out of their money, out of their donation money. Right? Go back and look at the story of Patrisse Cullors. who spent millions of dollars out of the BLM coffers on personal real estate. That is who these people are. So Chris Kuehne is charged in connection with January 6th, sentenced to, I think it was 75 days in prison. 75 days in prison, 60 days of home detention, and 2 years of probation. But the FBI showed up at his house in the middle of the night when it was, according to this report, 12 degrees outside. And while they ransacked the house and arrested him, they made his wife, his pregnant wife, thought I had the video pulled up. They made his pregnant wife stand outside. Here's a photograph from the body cam, or from the door footage, like the Ring doorbell footage. Bear with me a second. I had this video pulled up. That's the World Weather Report. Damn it. I wanted to show you the video, but anyway, they dragged him out, and so they oh my God, forgive me, I'm getting a little flustered because I'm so infuriated that this occurred. So I'll dig into that a little more in just a second here. These FBI agents showed up in multiple vehicles, surrounded the house, lights flashing, with laser aiming devices on their assault rifles. Right? The lefties like that big scary word. Let's talk about how big a fucking scary word that is. They showed up with their laser sights on their rifles and raided this home, waking this family up in the middle of the night, dragged this woman and her 4-year-old son out into the cold, out into the 12-degree cold. And you can see in the image here, right? It's 12 degrees outside, y'all. They made them stand outside for hours in the cold. Look at that little boy. You see that? That is not even a long sleeve shirt. Right? You can see down at the bottom corner here, he's barefoot. Mama is barefoot, 12 degrees outside, pregnant woman, holding this little boy. So he's not putting his bare feet on the cold ground. And she miscarried the next day. Christopher Wray is personally responsible for the murder of that child. So let me tell you what really just boils my blood about this. These are government agents, FBI agents. These are men who raised their hand and swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They're just following orders, though. They're just following orders. If you have raised your hand and made that oath, an incredibly important part of the duty that you bear in order to uphold that oath is to understand the Constitution and the law at least sufficiently so that you can recognize when an order is unlawful. No reasonable person can make an argument that it is lawful that an order to detain a pregnant woman and a 4-year-old child with no accommodation for their safety and health in 20 degrees below freezing weather, middle of the night, resulting in the miscarriage of the unborn child. It's a miracle the little boy didn't die of exposure. This is torture. They tortured this woman into miscarrying. Now, I can hate Christopher Wray all day for being in charge of making this happen. But you're telling me, this story is telling me, and I'd love to see every one of these at the end of a rope after a conviction, that not a single one of these FBI agents had the moral fortitude and the intestinal integrity, the mere temerity to challenge the order. Not a goddamn one of them had the integrity to say, guys, whoa! We are torturing a child. Right, I can even grant, like, these are cops, right? FBI agents. We're basically talking about cops. Okay. Doesn't take a whole lot to be a cop. Right? A GED and 6 months of pretend training. Cool. So, we're not talking about our best and our brightest. But for God's sake, man! Lenny was sad when the rabbits died. You don't have to be real smart to feel something when you're being told to torture children, to murder children. And I make the point about the smart, because let's be very clear. This was done in order to support the re-election attempt of Joe Biden by his corrupted, weaponized Department of Justice. Legion says these are FBI counter-terror agents. They are supposed to be operators, not cops. That's a good point. That's actually a very good point. They're supposed to be operators, which means they're supposed to be at a much higher level of intelligence, right? The fact that they're in that position, the fact that they've made it into counterterror, there's a level of intelligence required there. And I'm not speaking about like your intellectual quotient. I mean, to be associated with as a counterterror agent, that is a level of entry into the intelligence community, into the world of clandestine services. Sergeant Major points out correctly that Hoover the tranny built the FBI to capture power, and that is precisely what it has done for the entirety of its life cycle. We've covered that several times. The FBI has never been a legitimate law enforcement agency. They have conducted false flags and the torture, interrogation, frame jobs on American citizens throughout the whole history of their existence. I don't know that I will ever, as long as there exists an FBI, I don't know that I will ever again be able to vote for any politician whose platform does not include the abolition of the FBI, to be followed immediately by a RICO case involving every current former agent. As near as I'm concerned at this point, what we're seeing in the FBI is a state-sponsored weapon against the Constitution of the United States. I cannot easily imagine a more clear-fitting enemy, domestic enemy of the Constitution and the United States of America. RICO the FBI. Every single one of them. Every one. I don't care if you're the fucking janitor. Like Tim Pool has talked about the Epstein list, right? They hyped it up real big. Oh, we're putting out the Epstein list, and what they put out, we talked about this on the show before. What they put out was the list of Epstein associates, not the client list, which is what we really want to see. Now, the associates list, that includes people who Epstein he donated to their political campaign. He went to their fundraisers. They attended colleges together. Or people who were employed by Epstein, the staff, the janitors, et cetera, et cetera. And Tim Pool has said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, if you were a janitor at an Epstein facility and knew that the shit was going on, you are culpable. You are complicit. You should be in jail. Because at a minimum, what you did was you were aiding and abetting. So, same thing when you talk about the FBI. I don't give a shit if you're a janitor at an FBI facility. If you've got nothing to do with the actual law enforcement work going on there, you are involved. You're there, you know what's happening, and you're keeping your mouth shut, fuck you. Hang. RICO, conviction, capital punishment. And I say that not as the opinion of somebody that just likes a little bloodshed, but Section 242 is clear. If the deprivation of civil liberties under color of law results in death, like, for example, the clear and obvious murder of an unborn child by a militarized squad of FBI assailants, Section 242 says that the penalty for that is death. RICO, everybody in the FBI. It took a lot. It took a lot. It took this for my priority to switch from abolishing the ATF to abolishing the FBI. The FBI is going to go first and then the ATF. Regent says it's clear at this point that the FBI cannot be reformed. The agency needs to be disbanded and all personnel needs a NTR designator, never to return on their final eval. Abso-fucking-lutely. That is the barest minimum. That is where you start, and then you arrest them all and you RICO them. I mean, that is clearly what's happening here. And if there were anything, I ranted on that for a while, and I wanted to, I'm going to pull this up real quick to further drive home the point. Okay, Steve Baker has not been murdered yet. But, I mean, we've seen it. This is what our government does now, is they incarcerate people they disagree with or people that are a threat to the establishment, and then they murder them in jail. FBI charging docs in Steve Baker J6 case show he was working as a journalist. Steve Baker was journalist for The Blaze. He was at January 6th. He was not charged until just recently. And here's what changed. Baker is the one that got his hands on some of the footage from January 6th. And he pointed out, and this is especially interesting given that Chris Kuehne was just arrested and in relationship to his activity with the Proud Boys. There were a bunch of Proud Boys who were convicted and sentenced, and they were convicted on charges of seditious conspiracy. Turns out, the way that story went down is the one cop in his first testimony actually said that the Proud Boys were very helpful and they were talking people down, et cetera, et cetera. Then he came back and he recanted that story and said, "Oh no, I was scared for my life." Another Capitol Police officer, and you'll forgive me, I don't remember the names of the liars here, but the other Capitol Police officer shows up, testifies that he was there and he saw the Proud Boys attacking and beating up and screaming the N-word at the officer who changed his testimony later. Steve Baker took the footage and tracked the second guy, the one that said he was there and saw what happened, and was able to prove with surveillance video that not only it's not just that he didn't see what he says he saw, he was in a different building for the entire period of time during which the first officer was interacting with the Proud Boys in the Capitol. Steve Baker has this motherfucker dead to rights on video with timestamps, right? And these are the Capitol building. This is the government's own CCTV with the timestamps, and places the second officer not just away from the scene, but in a different building for the entire period that the encounter happened. That officer perjured himself in order to corroborate the other officer who also perjured himself. Now, let me be fair. The second officer, it's possible that he's telling the truth when he says, I actually had a scary experience with the Proud Boys, and I was lying the first time I testified under oath. But the fact remains, he gave two contradictory testimonies under oath. So even if we don't know which one is true, we do know conclusively that he perjured himself. He lied under oath in one of those cases. In the other one, where there's the video evidence showing him not even in the building at the time of the occurrence, who testified that he was a witness to the accusation, he also perjured himself. And then all of a sudden, the FBI charges Steve Baker. What did they charge him with, you might ask? We don't know exactly. Because what they did is they issued him a summons, an order, to appear and surrender himself. And they told his lawyer, we can discuss the charges after he surrenders himself, because we know that if we tell him what his charges are, he will go to Twitter and he will tell everybody what he's being charged with. I should hope so. Guys, believe it or not, when the government files criminal charges against an American citizen, that is a matter of public record by law. You don't get secret charges. You don't get secret charges. Unless you're going to do some FISA court shit and go in there and assert that Steve Baker is a foreign intelligence asset. You don't get secret charges. That's not how any of this works. The FBI is not a law enforcement agency. The FBI is the Pravda and torture wing of the Democrat Party. They're not only not a nonpartisan, fair evaluator of fact, which law enforcement should be, they are an explicitly partisan, hyper-politicized, violent, and they are the violent wing of an extreme ideology that is completely captured. They are so captured that a squad of a dozen or so men are perfectly comfortable torturing an unborn baby to death. And none of them saying anything. None of them voicing protest. None of them refusing to follow an unlawful order. Not one. The Legion is absolutely right. There can be no reform. That cannot be reformed. These men are not adequately moral agents to be trusted with the interpretation and enforcement of law. They must, at a minimum, be excised from the system of justice by termination and the NTR on the final eval. That's it. You're fired, and you can never work in law enforcement in any capacity ever again. And again, not even as a janitor. You can never be employed by any law enforcement agency under any circumstances ever. I know it's a heavy one it's a heavy note to start the day off with. I hate to start a Monday on a story like this, but guys, this is one that I couldn't sit on. I couldn't put this one off for a few days. I really wanted to get ahead of this one and cover this one immediately. So I'd like to say I hope you enjoyed the show, but I don't think enjoyed is the word. But I appreciate you guys taking the time, and I hope you enjoyed your cup of coffee. It's scary out there right now, and I think the scariest thing is we live in a world that has supervillains and no superheroes. We live in a world that has Lex Luthors and no Batman. We live in a world with Jokers and no Superman. And in that world, where there are Jokers and Luthors and Harlequins, it turns out that even Commissioner Gordon is your enemy. That you can't even turn to the police. Danny says we don't even have a Robin. Woo! I'm gonna have to go ahead and put a pin in it there, guys. Y'all be safe. We love you. And hopefully I'll survive to see you till tomorrow.